What's going on, guys? We're gonna beef up the tool arsenal today. Let's see what we got. All right, so we've picked up a new tool in the shop here. We picked up a 3.5 cubic feet cement mixer from Harbor Freight. These run $279. I'm sure you can get a little bit of a discount if you watch for the sales or use a coupon. I had my wife run up and pick it up for me because I wanted to try and hurry and get this done. So the reason I have this, I have seen multiple videos on Instagram and YouTube of guys that have burn tables, and they'll buy these mixers and they'll modify them a few different ways just to make them more user-friendly. But what they do is they turn it into a tumbler. And when I say a tumbler, what they'll do is they'll add some sort of lid on them most of the time to hold the parts in. But they'll take their parts that they've burned on the burn table that have all that slag and that dross on them, and they'll throw them in these mixers with screws, bolts, chunks of metal. I've seen them use tumbling media like rocks. There's one guy that uses sandblasting grit. They let it run for 30 minutes to an hour and they come out looking just beautiful. And that's going to save me some time. That's going to save us effort because we don't have to use a grinder to clean them up and flip that slag all over the shop. We're saving on wire wheels and grinding discs. So I think it's going to be a benefit. I'm hoping that it works out the way we want it to. So that's what we got going. So we'll go ahead and get this unboxed. I'm going to have to assemble it. Once I get it assembled, I'll show you guys what my plan is for how I want to modify this. You guys that watch NBS Welding on YouTube, he actually bought this exact same unit and he modified it and set it up the way he wanted to so that he could use it for parts that he needed to tumble or knock the rust off or whatever. And I kind of like the way he set it up. I am going to change a few things, but I've watched his video on it. I've also watched Chasing Smoke. There's a guy on, I don't know if he's on YouTube, but I know he's on Instagram. There's a guy on there called Chasing Smoke, and he runs a fab shop, builds a lot of rocket stoves and stuff like that. He did this same thing. He's the guy that uses sandblasting grit, and his parts turn out great. So we're going to build one and modify it the way we want to. I've got kind of an idea on how I want to set the lid up. So we'll take a look at it. Once we get this all set up, I'll give you guys a look and kind of explain what I want to do. So let's get after it. We'll come back to you when we got this all assembled. This looks like a pretty lengthy process, so we'll get this all built, come back to you once it's done. All right, guys, so we got this all put together, or everything that we're going to use anyway. There are a couple parts that we are not going to use. There's two things I've got to do. I'm going to build a flange with a cover plate that I can attach to this so that when I'm tumbling parts, I can just unscrew it, pull the cover off, throw my parts in, pull them out, and it will seal it, which I'm thinking will help hold some of the noise in because these are extremely noisy. The other thing I need to do is I am going to put some fins inside. I'll probably use a cardboard template to fabricate 3 or 4 fins in here, and I'm just going to weld them perpendicular to the unit so that as the parts are going around it tumbles. The fins that it came with are really tall and I don't really like that. This is one of the things that NBS Welding did to his and I liked that. So I'm going to add some fins to it. The fins I'm going to put in are probably going to be, I feel like a 2-inch fin will probably be good enough for what we're doing, and that will give it some pretty good tumble motion. so that it will clean up the parts effectively. I'll probably put 4 of those in here. I'm just going to weld them in. I'm going to weld the flange on here just like NBS welding did, and the flange will be on the outside. So the way that I'm going to attach the cover plate, I'm going to do a little bit differently than he did. I've been brainstorming about it, and I think I've come up with a decent idea for what will work best for me. We'll go ahead and start getting our ideas sketched on a piece of paper. We'll go over to the burn table, start drafting our parts up. And when we get to that point, I'll come back and show you guys what we got. All right, guys, we got our parts all drafted on the machine here. We got a few pieces of scrap we're going to cut this out of. I'll show you what we got. So we've got our fins right there. And then I do have our 2 flanges drafted here. We'll cut those after because I'm going to have to switch the material. But we will go ahead and cut these now. All right, so we'll get these parts burned. Once the parts are burned, we'll come back here and I'll show you how they fit. All right, guys, here's what we got. I got 4 bolts here. Got our parts all cleaned up. All right, guys, so we got our parts all cleaned up here. And after brainstorming on this for a week or 2, this is how I've decided I want to do it. I've got some 1/4 by 3/4 bolts here. What I'm gonna do, I'm going to drop these in these holes and I'm going to weld these on here. Then I'm going to flip it over, and this is how it's going to get welded on to the drum. That way, when I take my cover plate, I can drop it over these holes and I'll just get some 1/4 inch wing nuts and I'll just tighten those down on those 4 wing nuts, and it'll be quick and easy. When I got to take the cover plate off, load parts, slap it on there, tighten down 4 wing nuts, and she's rolling. So that's my plan. So now I'll go ahead and I'll get these bolts tacked in so that we can flip it over. We'll go clean the paint off of the drum on the mixer, and then once we get to that point, we'll be able to start fitting this up. So we'll get these welded out first, and then we'll go to that point. I'm going to go through, put a little teeny tack on all of them. And then I'll flip it over and I'm going to check this on it first. Okay, I like that. There's some play in it. I think that's going to be just dandy. Now I'm going to add some weld to these. I'm not going to go crazy because I don't want to put too much heat in it, but I am going to throw a couple good sized tacks on them. We're ready to go over and fit this on the mixer. So I'll go ahead and get the paint ground off of that. When I get ready to fit it, we'll go over there and start fitting. All right, guys, we got this all cleaned up in here. So our parts are gonna fit just like that. We'll just add a few stitches on there. This material in here, it's pretty thin. So we're just going to put some small stitches in there. That's going to be enough to hold it. We just need to give it something, some sort of profile to make it tumble. We'll go ahead and do that now. You guys probably aren't going to see me. You guys probably aren't going to be able to see me do a whole lot. Kind of tight quarters in there. So I'll go ahead and get these welded out, and then I'll show you what I got after. Okay guys, just want to show you this material is extremely thin, so it's really easy to blow through. But I did get all 4 of our ribs welded in. You can see there's an extra grind spot there. I just wanted some practice, so I did get 4 ribs put in there. I think that's going to be good. That'll make it tumble, but be aware that is thin material. I'm actually interested to see how long this lasts before it wears through. I mean, I'm sure it depends on how much you use it and how heavy of parts you're putting in it, but for lighter gauge stuff, for base plates on handrail, little tabs, stuff like that that really sucks to clean up because it's so small, this will be perfect for that. I'm hoping it'll last at least a couple years or something. I guess we'll see. I'll keep you guys posted. So now that those are in place, I'm gonna tip the drum vertical and I'll start fitting up the flange. So we'll do that now. All right guys, I'm gonna show you what we got here. We got a helper out here. Come here. Say hi.
Hi.
All right, so we're getting ready to fill this up. And I did go through all my old junk. I've got a bunch of hardware here I completely forgot I had. Probably never going to use it. It's a bunch of lag bolts, a bunch of just random parts. That's the kind of stuff that you want to use. So yeah, that'll work. So we're going to fill this up with a bunch of old hardware. Nuts and bolts. That should get us started. I'm going to show you what our base plates look like so that you can see what they look like before and after. So here's what they look like before. You can see there's some pretty good dross on there. There is a little bit of surface rust. Not a lot. So I'm hoping that there's enough stuff in there to do the job. Here's the lid. Turned out good. Got the handle welded on. I got 4 wing nuts. So we're ready to tumble this. I'm gonna go see what other kind of junk I can find to put in here that will kind of lighten the blow. I'm afraid if I don't have enough stuff in there, it's gonna beat the piss out of this drum. So I'm gonna see what else I can find. We'll put that in there. And then when we're ready to fire it up, we'll give you a look at that. All right, guys, let's show you what we got. You better get down, you're gonna fall. We got our tumbler over here, and I'm here to tell you this thing is freaking loud. I'm talking like might get the cops called on us. So I'm gonna run it for a little bit. I've got it on the side of the shop here. I'm gonna run it for 15-20 minutes, see how it does. I will start it up and show you guys how loud it is, but you're not gonna get any sort of concept for really how loud it is and obnoxious it is. So it would probably quiet it down quite a bit if I bought some bags of screws or something and put that in it. So I may do that, but it is freaking loud. So here we go. It's not terrible right here. So we'll let it run for a minute and see how it looks. We'll come back and give you guys a look. All right, guys, we're making a change here. I don't really like the way it's running with the nuts and bolts, and it's beating the piss out of this drum. When it goes around, I think it's got too much force. So I'll show you what we got planned. I'm gonna take the lid off this. I got a 5-gallon bucket here. I'm gonna dump all the hardware out, and then I'll show you what we're gonna go to. Here's the finish. It's a little rough. I mean, it is doing what we wanted it to, but the finish is a little rough. It's got all sorts of little dings in it. I mean, it's not a big deal. We can smooth that up. But I think the material that we have in here is just a little too coarse. So we're starting over. All right, a little sandblasting grit. 1 bucket, 70 grit. I bought it from Harbor Freight. So I think the grit's gonna give us a nice finish. It'll give us that nice, smooth, fine finish. The other thing I picked up is some of this tumbler media. These are ceramic, and they're just little chunks of ceramic, but it's for tumbling and polishing metal. And I picked this up at Harbor Freight as well. I got 2 of them. I think the combination of the coarse material and the fine material is probably gonna do what we want it to. Or at least that's what I'm hoping. Put our parts back in. Put our lid on. Plug it in. I'm gonna go get my hair cut and let this run. When we get back, we'll see what they look like. All right, guys, we got the lid pulled off of this, and we're gonna check them out. It's been running for about an hour and 15 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna show you what we got here. The finish is a little bit, hopefully you can see that. The finish is a little rough, and the reason it's a little rough, I shouldn't say rough, it's just you can see where the bolts and hardware that I had in there before chipped the mill scale. It's not gonna matter, and it doesn't feel rough, it just chipped the mill scale off funny. But now that we have sandblasting grit in there, hopefully you can see that there is 0 plasma slag on those edges. So the sandblasting grit has knocked all of that off. There's no slag left on these, so I can take these in there and I can weld them right to the handrail. So that's gonna be pretty cool. I am gonna do another test because I feel like the maiden voyage with the hardware was not a good idea. I think the hardware I had in there was too big. I think if you use something smaller like nails or screws, it seemed to work really good for NBS welding. He used screws, I believe. So the fact that I have the ceramic tumbling media and the sandblasting grit in there now, I do think it'll do a lot better job. And I do think we'll get the finished product that we're looking for. Well, I think that's gonna save us a lot of time. I think it's gonna be really nice to be able to throw my parts in there while I'm working on something else. And then by the time I'm done and ready to go get them out, they're polished up. So it's just another one of those things that I think is gonna save me some time. Pretty happy with the way it turned out. Hopefully you guys learned something. Hopefully if you guys build one, you can learn from my mistakes. And I think in the end, it turned out pretty much the way we wanted it to. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. See you on the next one. We'll go over to the drafting tape. Goodness. All right, guys, let's